Second Amendment rights are important, but there are other rights that we care about as well, and we have to be able to balance them. Because our right to worship freely and safely, that right was denied to Christians in Charleston, South Carolina, and that was denied Jews in Kansas City, and that was denied Muslims in Chapel Hill and Sikhs in Oak Creek. They had rights too. Our right to peaceful assembly, that right was robbed from moviegoers in Aurora and Lafayette. Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara and from high schoolers at Columbine and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day.
Former President Barack Obama there in January 2016, reacting to a spate of mass shootings. The president attempted to introduce gun control legislation several times during his tenure, but those attempts failed. As he entered his final year in office, he signed several executive actions focused on controlling gun access. The issue of gun control is where our next conversation in Colorado began. We spoke with Betsy, an arts educator and small business owner, and Lana, who's an NRA instructor who teaches at a local gun club. Both are grandmothers and very active in their communities. The two women surprised themselves when they agreed on how to better protect students from mass shootings in schools.
When I say gun control to either one of you, do you like that term? Do you believe in gun control in any form?
I feel like gun control is just another word of the government intruding into our lives. One more time with the government putting another mandate or another law on the books. We were given the Second Amendment for a reason, and so gun control does absolutely nothing. Somebody who has mental illness that steals his mother's gun and goes and does a horrible tragedy like Sandy Hook, he would have found that gun anywhere. He would have broken into a neighbor's house and stole their gun. Didn't necessarily have to be his mom's. So it's mental illness. That is something that's totally separate, and you can't combine the two.
It's not the guns that we have an issue with. It is the people that are utilizing and have the power to get to the guns. I think that word control is the wrong word to use.
Why?
I think we need to look at how we're phrasing it, how we're branding it. I think there is enough control right now. I just think it's implementing what we have in place and looking at the verbiage we use to make people comfortable with that. As an American citizen, when you start talking about taking away somebody's constitutional right, something that our forefathers fought for and that we feel that it's one of the reasons that we're so blessed to live in this country.
Yes.
When you start talking about controlling that and taking that away, it angers a lot of us. Those are the things that we have to be careful of, because our young people are going to be the next ones to carry that torch of what is your constitutional right versus control. And we all know that young people right now, as soon as you say control to a teenager, they will dig their heels in.
Schools, typically, 100% of them are gun-free zones.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Your children, the most precious things in your life, you're sending to a place where there are no guns. And what is the school waiting on? The school's waiting for the good guy with that gun to come and save them. And then the tragedies are happening at a school where they're sitting ducks.
Well, and I will tell you that at the school that I teach at, that conversation has come up. I personally would not have any problem going and having my certification done.
You're probably like the third person I've talked to that finds themselves on that side of, where you're still kind of thinking maybe, maybe not, but yet you would be willing to go through the certification and the training so that you could carry. For a school, that is probably the #1 topic right now, is to arm our staffs and arm our teachers.
Would you feel comfortable having a gun in your classroom?
Absolutely.
Really?
Only if obviously the weapon was locked up the way it's supposed to be. But for so many of the schools, they're sitting ducks. They're walking from one building 3 blocks to another building, and if somebody has gotten it into their brain that they're going to hurt students, there's really no protection.
This week marks 5 years since the Sandy Hook shooting. And one of the questions I've been asking people is, do you remember where you were when you heard about that, and did it change your mind about any of these issues?
The first thing that came through my mind is, why were the teachers not armed to stop this? They could have stopped the threat. They could have stopped it from happening. They had to wait for law enforcement to get there. And that it was children. That's something I'm a grandmother of 4 grandchildren, and to me, nothing will stop me from going and protecting them. They pick on schools. They pick on churches. They pick on movie theaters. They pick on places that are gun-free zones, and that is the debate that needs to happen.
Many, many churches now, I can tell you at my church, our security team is armed.
Oh,
and I think it's a very sad day when people that are coming to worship, whether it be at a mosque or a church or a synagogue, where we have to have people on the facility to stop people from shooting other people. And again, it's not the gun, it's the people that have the gun. That's what we need to have stricter controls on. As a mom, as a grandmother, my heart was just aching. I mean, I'm gonna cry now, because anybody who would attack a child, when you look at that young teacher that did everything she could to save her children, if she were armed, more of those children would have been saved.
If you have a student who is angry or upset or a little mentally unstable, is it too easy for them to have access to high-powered weapons?
People automatically think, an assault rifle, ooh, scary black gun. Not necessarily. They are meant for lots of reasons. They have to go through the same checks as anybody else has to get them. And I think that people like that will get their hands on them no matter what.
But, I know people right now that have arrests on their record that have bought guns.
What kind of arrests?
Well, and I don't think that's what this discussion's about.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is if it's something that's anything from a felony on down, then they should not be allowed to have access to any sort of harmful instruments of any kind.
Right.
So Betsy, it sounds to me like you're saying you think what we have would be enough if it were actually enforced across the board.
Yeah, I think
okay.
Looking on both sides of it, the people that are going no gun control and those of us who think there needs to be control, I think the parts are in place. I think the people that need to maintain the parts are not always the best at doing their job. I think our lives are filled enough with enough rules and regulations. We have everything in place that we need. I think we need to do a better job of carrying that through.
We just need to enforce the ones
we need to enforce the ones that we have. Or going back from there, if the guys are turning these people away and they're still getting the gun, then we need to figure out a better way to monitor what happens in the dark area where people
work in that space. So after somebody goes to you and their background check comes back and you send them packing, it's that next step where you'd like to see. Would you agree if there was some sort of legislation that you thought could prevent something happening in that gray area after they leave your shop?
The gray area is so open. There's no idea what that person was going to do. If the person comes in and gets denied from us and they go out on the street and then they go buy it from a gangbanger down the road.
Right, but I'm saying if some theoretically brilliant person who's much smarter than I am came up with some sort of measure that you both agreed would help prevent the guy who leaves your shop from getting a gun illegally, is that something
Yes.
you would theoretically support?
Sure, because they would be put on some kind of, watch out. There was a
Yeah.
reason why he was denied to begin with. Was he a wife beater? Did he have a domestic violence charge? There has to be a reason why he was denied walking out of our store.
That's where the breakdown is.
So what makes me so happy to sit here and have this conversation with you, Betsy, is that I thought we were going to be on almost complete opposite ends, and we're not.
No.